The morning sun cast long shadows across Windsor Castle's ancient stones as April Fool's Day dawned with a crisp spring air and an unusual promise. Tour buses began arriving earlier than usual, unloading waves of camera-wielding visitors eager to witness the pageantry of the changing of the guard. Among them stood Nick Dawson, his American accent cutting through the reverent murmurs of the crowd as he adjusted his sleek sunglasses. "This is going to be epic, fellas," he declared with a confident grin, scanning the growing throng of tourists. At 26, Nick had cultivated a modest online following back in Los Angeles with what he branded as boundary-pushing, consequence-free comedy. April Fool's Day at Windsor Castle? It was, in his mind, the perfect stage. Trailing behind him were his friends Ethan and Chris, both visibly uncomfortable, cameras already rolling despite their hesitation. "Maybe we should just, I don't know, take normal photos like everyone else," Ethan suggested, his voice low. "These guards aren't really known for their humor." Nick scoffed, running a hand through his immaculately tousled hair. "They're paid to stand still and look serious. Everyone tries to make them laugh. I'm going bigger. This is going to be legendary." 20 yards away, Corporal Elijah Grant stood immobile at his post. His scarlet uniform gleamed beneath the sun, and his bearskin cap added several inches to his already formidable height. 8 years in the King's Guard had taught him how to read a crowd, and he had already taken note of the cocky tourists preparing for something unusual. Some visitors were respectful, others tested the boundaries. A rare few, like the loud American now, setting up for what he clearly believed would be viral gold, came seeking confrontation. Behind Elijah's stoic exterior lay the discipline of a soldier who had served in conflict zones and carried a deep understanding of the role he represented. As Nick and his hesitant crew drew closer, Elijah remained still, eyes fixed forward, a pillar of ceremonial composure forged through grueling training. "Look at him," Nick stage whispered to his friends, making sure nearby tourists could hear. "Like a mannequin in a fancy Halloween costume. Think they choose them based on who can look the most constipated." A few tourists chuckled nervously. A British couple shot sharp, disapproving glances. Nick launched into his act, strutting exaggeratedly in a mock military march, arms swinging wildly, legs kicking high. "Attention," he bellowed in a butchered British accent. "Royal Guard inspection." More awkward laughter rippled through the crowd. Nearby, a castle staff member approached. "Sir, I must remind you that the King's Guards are active military personnel. Please show proper respect." Nick flashed a charming smile. "Just having a bit of fun. April Fools, you know." But once she walked off, he muttered, "Killjoy," just loud enough to be heard. With no immediate consequence, Nick's confidence ballooned. He moved in closer, posing for exaggerated selfies next to Elijah, pretending to dust off the soldiers' buttons while offering mock commentary. "Missed a spot, mate. Can't have the King's toy soldiers looking sloppy." "This is getting out of hand," Chris whispered, but continued filming. A nearby teacher spoke softly to her group of students. "Despite what that man says, the King's Guard are elite soldiers. Most have seen real combat." Nick caught the words and smirked. "Did you hear that? I'm harassing a war hero." Oops. His air quotes and mocking tone were losing their audience. The laughter was thinning. Respect was turning into unease. Throughout it all, Elijah remained unmoved. His training ran deep. No tourist's antics, no matter how obnoxious, could shake his discipline. But Nick mistook this resolve for weakness. "I swear, they could replace him with a wax figure and nobody'd notice," Nick declared, leaning in with theatrical exaggeration. "Hello, anyone home? Or did they just wind you up this morning and leave you here?" A castle security officer quietly spoke into his radio. Tourists began stepping back, sensing something was about to cross a line. Nick, however, was too wrapped up in his performance to notice. "Time for the main event," he announced, reaching into his backpack. Ethan stepped forward. "Dude, what are you doing?" "Relax," Nick grinned. "It's just water." From the bag, he pulled what looked like an expensive DSLR camera. Only his friends knew it was a high-end water gun disguised to look like photography gear. He had spent over $250 on it at a specialty shop in London, convinced it would catapult him to online fame. Now, he proclaimed, slipping into his MC voice, I'm going to capture a royal reaction shot. Say cheese. The teacher, noticing the plastic gleam of the lens, understood immediately. Stop, she shouted, stepping forward. That's completely inappropriate. Nick didn't stop. He aimed. 3, 2, 1. A sharp burst of water shot straight into Corporal Grant's face. It hit with shocking force, soaking his immaculate red tunic, dribbling down from his bearskin cap. For one stunned moment, time froze. Gasps echoed. Parents shielded their children. Phones dropped. Even the security personnel who had been advancing were a second too late. Grant stood motionless, the water streaming down his face. But his eyes locked onto Nick with the intensity of a man who had faced far worse than some self-important prankster. Nick's grin faltered. The silence wasn't the laughter he'd anticipated. This wasn't going viral for the right reasons. It's just water, mate, he mumbled. Just a prank. The movement, when it came, was swift and precise. Elijah stepped forward, his gloved hand locking around Nick's wrist with the perfect control of someone trained in tactical restraint. With his other hand, he disarmed the water gun effortlessly. Nick's bravado disintegrated. I was a joke. Just a joke. The weapon, Elijah said calmly, holding the disguised water gun with professional precision. Is this yours? It's a toy. Nick stammered, panic rising. It's April Fool's. No harm. Assaulting a king's guard is a criminal offense, Elijah interrupted, his voice firm but composed. Water still dripped from his uniform, but his presence remained steady and authoritative. 2 castle security officers arrived, flanking Nick. The crowd now formed a solemn circle, silently watching. Just a prank, mate. Nick tried again, but the words rang hollow. Elijah's eyes didn't waver. This uniform isn't a costume. These medals aren't props. I serve in Iraq. The men standing guard tomorrow just returned from NATO drills in Estonia. Nick blinked, a dawning comprehension slowly overtaking his earlier smugness. Every button, every thread, every brass detail on this tunic represents more than 300 years of service and sacrifice. When you mock it, you mock those who never came home. The crowd stood still. The silence was no longer awkward. It was reverent. I didn't know, Nick said quietly. I thought it was just theater. Ceremonial duty is earned through active service, Elijah explained. It's not for show. It's for honor. The guards began to lead Nick away, one of them quietly explaining the potential legal consequences. As they guided him across the courtyard, Nick looked back. I really am sorry, he called, his voice soft, sincere. Elijah offered the barest nod before returning to his post. In one smooth motion, he resumed position, his stance as perfect as ever. Only the dark stains on his tunic hinted at what had transpired. The crowd, slowly and respectfully, began to disperse. No more silly poses. No more jokes. Parents whispered to children about respect. Tourists lowered their cameras. Something had changed. Ethan and Chris stepped toward the officers, explaining they were Nick's friends. Their cameras were no longer rolling. Through it all, Corporal Grant stood firm, his dignity untouched. In the face of mockery, he had chosen not retaliation, but a lesson, one Nick Dawson would never forget. Because sometimes the deepest understanding comes when ignorance meets reality head-on. What began as a prank ended as a reckoning, and perhaps a transformation.